All right, so I'll just give like one example of the way that I looked at the Bible when I wanted to see it through a Darwinian perspective. When I was kind of a leftist communist, like when it says "be fruitful and multiply" in Genesis, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's what the Bible would teach because it was written by men in a tribe and they wanted their tribe to survive. So this didn't really come from God. It came from men who wrote it. They wanted to for their tribe to survive, and the way that they survive is by being fruitful and by multiplying, by having children. So I kind of viewed things through that Darwinian perspective. Now, I think that the reason why my grandpa didn't like the whole genetic Darwinian perspective is because my grandpa would say, and he's probably accurate, if I believe that way, then I'm going to act that way. And I believe like, oh, it's all about, spreading your genes. And so I want to be superior and I want to spread my genes as much as possible and stuff. Then I'm going to act in that way, and I'm focusing on the self. And ironically, the more you try to save the self, the more you destroy it, right? Whereas my grandpa would say the flow is inquiry, contemplation, increasing comprehensivity. And that's what my grandpa calls the secret place of the Most High, which is the flow. The Bible talks about the secret place of the Most High, and that's where you get that's where you're saved. But not when you're focused on the protection and promotion of the self. Because I think it goes back to what my grandpa says: "The good I would, I do not; that which I would not, I end up doing." That's what Paul says. And the idea behind that, my grandpa says, that's calculative thinking. If you do rational, calculative thinking, this is what my grandpa told me. In the Enlightenment, they taught like rationalism, right? But then they did like romanticism. So I asked my grandpa, okay, what was the significance of moving from Enlightenment to romanticism, where they want to go into their feelings? Now, my grandpa would say both is, feelings and rational thinking. That's both the self, right? But at least they're trying to break free of rational thinking, and they think, okay, well, maybe if we get into our feelings and emotions, that will help. But my grandpa would say, at least they're breaking free of the rational, calculative thinking to the feelings, and they're trying a different way. But really, my grandpa would say the flow is the ultimate way, the secret place of the Most High, and that's transcendence of the self. Now, and I remember I asked my grandpa, like, what is the meaning of I, Robot, the movie I, Robot? My grandpa would say, like, okay, the robots kind of represent calculative thinking, trying to make things happen, the ego, immortality projects, where you try to use robots to help you to live and survive and stuff. But my grandpa even says, like, the story of the Adam and Eve in the garden is representative of the flow, because the biting of the apple of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, that's knowledge of what works and what doesn't work, and that's calculative thinking, trying to make things happen. But the good I would, I do not; that which I would not, I end up doing. Darth Vader tries to save his wife. He's using calculative thinking and fear and manipulation, and he ends up killing his wife. The good that he would, he does not. He wants to save his wife, he ends up killing his wife, because he's so stuck in the self, trying to make things happen, the ego, and then he ends up killing her. And I've faced that a lot of times. When you try to make things happen and it ends up backfiring. As opposed to the flow, my grandpa would say the flow is when you transcend the self. Now, okay, so as I said, around like 2020, I started playing with, or 2019, I started playing with Compton College. I ran into Kenny, Malik's dad, but I was too afraid to just ask him for the basketball video. So again, this is my fear and maybe manipulation and stuff, right? If I wouldn't have been in the fear, maybe I would have, just got the basketball videos. But anyways, in like 2021, I finally get a hold of Kenny, he was P. Diddy's bodyguard. And he says he has the videos, but then he's acting too crazy. And again, I tried to make things happen. I let him stay in my place. And, you know, I'd been ostracized by my family, you know, and I want to show people, hey, look, I'm cool. I got my friend Kenny, and I'm posting pictures of me and Kenny on my Instagram, trying to show that I'm cool, you know, and all this stuff. And again, I was maybe manipulating, trying to make things happen, but then Kenny didn't like that. And then, you know, but also he's going crazy himself. He was going crazy at the time. And anyways, we ended up getting in a fight because he's losing his mind. I'm upset. I just want my basketball videos. Everything just backfired. I ended up not getting the basketball videos, or I got some, but he said he had a lot more. But I told him that I would pay him to get basketball videos of when I was younger, because I want to study the swag flow. But and the way that I was going to pay him, my mom got me a job working in a warehouse. But again, I tried to talk to my mom. I was like, Mom, I don't need to work in a warehouse. My mom thinks I have schizophrenia. She thinks I'm insane. She thinks that because she hasn't seen me. Now, when I say she thinks you're insane, I'll tell this to my friends, and they'll be like, well, why does she think that? She probably has good reason. How could she have reason if she hasn't seen me since college? For 15 years, she hasn't really even seen me. It's just suppositions that she has that are irrational. She doesn't know me. She hasn't interacted with me. Like I said, every time I try to call her, I'd say, can I see you guys? Why don't you get a fucking life, you fucking loser? No, we're not going to see you. You have schizophrenia. You need to see a doctor. We're not going to see you. Why don't you get a life other than wanting to talk to your mom and dad, you fucking loser? She doesn't think that maybe that has negative effects on my psychology, ironically, you know? Maybe if I do have negative effects on my psychology, it's in part because of that. But my grandpa would say, don't make excuses. Just upgrade your software. So my mom got me a job working in a warehouse, but I told her, I was like, Mom, I don't need to work in a warehouse. I discovered theory of everything. Yes, that's true. But but I'm not crazy. Like, I know she thinks she thinks I'm going around everywhere and like, hey, I discovered theory of everything. Well, I'm like, I'm crazy. No, I'm not crazy. So, but she thinks I need to work in a warehouse. She's like, you are crazy. You are insane. You can't work in the real world. You need to be in a warehouse carrying Amazon things. So she give me a job working in a warehouse. So I did that for one day, but I didn't like it. Then, like I said, I was trying to get citizenship in Israel, and I got a letter from a rabbi, and my mom was so shocked. My mom was like, because the rabbi talked to my mom on the phone, and my mom was like, the rabbi said he likes you. And I'm like, yeah, people like me, Mom. And at that time, my swag flow was off. I'm getting the swag flow better. I want more videos when I was younger, but I was like, yes, people like me, Mom. I'm not, she thinks I'm like literally insane, like going around and, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm not fucking insane. Fucking retard. I'm not crazy. My mom thinks that though. So she's like, the rabbi actually liked you. And I'm like, yeah, some people like me, Mom. She's like, but okay. Because in her mind, she thinks I'm just insane. She has no idea. Like when I would tell her I could play professional basketball, she'd be like, you can't play professional basketball. You get a fucking life, you fucking loser. Oh my God, you're 27 years old. Oh, fucking. She's so fucking negative. But, but I ended up getting the letter. And like I said, even when I went to New York, Mom was like, don't act crazy over there. Don't yell at people. I'm like, I'm a normal person. But she hasn't seen me, so she doesn't know that. She hasn't given me a chance to see her. So then, like I said, in 2020, I forgot to mention, like in 2021, that's when I wrote my Based on True Story book. But like I said, I was confused about my grandpa because like for instance, in terms of the be fruitful, multiply. So my grandpa would say that the be fruitful, multiply, that's not about, it could be about, yeah, my grandpa would say having children could be good because it puts you in a context larger than yourself and all that, right? And that can help facilitate the flow and a family and stuff. It could, it could not, but it could. But my grandpa would say that also be fruitful, multiply could represent be fruitful in terms of creative projects. My grandpa says creative projects, working, being fruitful, those types of things help you to expand your awareness, expand your consciousness, grow, develop, evolve, and helps you to break out of stagnation, which is self-confirmatory. And my grandpa says there is no self. And then you're part of the anti-entropic reordering function. My grandpa says synergy right? So that was what we got in the argument with when I went to Washington in 2020 to stay with him. My grandpa was like, if you're going to be staying with me, you need to get a job because you can be part of the synergy anti-entropic rewarding function. And we got in an argument, and I'm like, Grandpa, I'd like to talk to Mom and Dad. And my grandpa's like, no. Well, my grandpa's like, well, maybe they'll talk to you, but if you're going to be staying with me, you need to be working on the synergy, the anti-entropic rewarding function of the universe. And I'm like, Grandpa, I discovered theory of everything. Can you help me get this out? He's like, there's no evidence that you discovered theory of everything because, like I said, he didn't understand the quadrant model. My grandpa has a lot of good ideas, but he just didn't understand the fact that we're in the quadrant matrix. He's like, there's no evidence. I'm like, yes, there is evidence. Look at my Facebook. I'm not interested. He doesn't know how to use Facebook to go through my pages. So then, like I said, I left Washington, and then I wrote my Based on True Story book, but at the time, my grandpa was saying he didn't like Trump. So I'm thinking, oh, so my grandpa's a leftist. And I'm thinking like, oh, so maybe my grandpa, and stuff like, his idea, like a right-wing idea I would think is, yeah, have be fruitful, multiply means have a family. But my grandpa's like, oh, there'll be no creative projects and stuff. But also that could be kind of right-wing too, because it's like, work and be productive and, transcend the self. But, it's synergy. That's conservative. That's preservation. But I'm thinking maybe my grandpa's a leftist, but my grandpa's talking about transcend dualistic software. But again, at the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I'm thinking, is that some hippie thing, like transcend dualistic software? Like everyone should race mix hippies? Like I didn't know what he's talking about at the time, and it took me a while to figure it out. And I'll describe how I started to figure it out later. But at this time, I'm still confused. What do you mean transcend the ego and transcend dualistic software? I'm like, I am transcending the ego, Grandpa. Okay, so I'm not racist. That's transcending the ego, right? I thought that transcending the ego meant don't be racist. I didn't understand what he's talking about. So I'm like, so I just went to my default where I see myself as Jewish and I want race mixing. I'm thinking, but that's me transcending the ego. So then I wrote my Based on True Story books, and again, like I write about how, I believed in Darwinism, but, that led me to white supremacy, and I was a white supremacist for a little bit, but that's not even true. I wasn't a white supremacist because I believed in Darwinism. When I believed in Darwinism, I wanted race mixing, and I wanted to think that like all humans came from Africa, and really the Africans. And this is one thing that my grandpa taught me. My grandpa would say there's no such thing as racism. My grandpa would say that there's just dualistic software and the consequences of dualistic software, but there's no such thing as racism. But I was like, oh, of course you say that because you're just a white supremacist Nazi. That's what I thought. But I wanted to believe there was such thing as racism. And the way that I saw racism was I thought it was, I thought that racism was based around Darwinism because I was like, okay, white people have certain genes, but I wanted to believe the materialistic interpretation that, everybody comes out of Africa and everyone outside of Africa is just inbreds, but the African man, he's the superior, he's the genetically rich man, and everybody outside, but I want to see Jews as kind of African because Jews have like curly hair. So I'm like, so in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, so but because I wanted the race mix of white people, and I wanted to see Jews as kind of a little bit more black. So that's why I was like kind of a black supremacist, and I was really a Jewish supremacist. I just wanted to destroy the white people, so I saw the white people as the biggest threat to the Jews. So, but I'm thinking to myself like, I wanted to believe the Darwinian explanation of how the races emerged and everything, and it was, and the reason why there's racism I wanted to say was because this is why even like I thought that the Mexicans and Asians are even racist against black people because I was like because whites and Mexicans and Asians are all very racially inbred, so that's why there's more there's less conflict between them compared to Africans, and why Africans are exploited so much because Africans are so genetically rich, and it was really just a way for me to like really extol the African, because I as a Marxist, I wanted, really what I wanted was just the African to be extolled and the white man to be lowered and the race mixing to go on and then the Jew to be raised at the top. But and just basically destroy the white race because I saw the white race as the enemy of the Jew. So, but I wanted to, so I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know I wasn't in the flow. I'm like, I'm in the flow. I transcend the ego. I'm not racist. I'm not a white supremacist. But I'm like, actually, this was my ego. But I didn't realize it. I really didn't realize I wasn't in the flow. But I wanted to be like, oh yeah, the inbred, everybody outside, but that's why there's racism against the black people. Because I saw that the white people, when they talked about the Native Americans, they would be like, they're a noble race with noble features. And I'd be like, yeah, because they recognize their genetic similarities between themselves because they're both come from that one group that left Africa, so they're all very genetically related. But the Africans, they're different. But that's why the whites and even the Native Americans look down upon Africans, because Africans are genetically distinct, and so racism does exist, Grandpa. That's what I wanted to believe. Racism does exist. It's due to Darwinism, and it's subconscious and it's instinctual. But my grandpa didn't like the idea of Darwinism and stuff, because my grandpa would be like, okay, well, if you believe in Darwinism, then you're justifying instinctual animalistic behavior. And my grandpa didn't believe didn't think it's accurate. And now I understand, like, it might not be accurate, you know? That's a conspiracy theory that I had, the Darwinism. That's a theory, that's a story that I told myself about reality. And I had an agenda, an ego agenda behind it. And it might not even be accurate. It might not be the truth. You know, there's other interpretations, like the religious interpretations, the Atlantis interpretation. There's a lot of interpretations of how the human races go. And so my grandpa would say, and even the quadrant model, like I wanted to justify the different races, or the reason why there's a conflict is because the Asian race represents the air, the white race represents water, the black race represents earth, and the brown race represents fire. And the conflicts between the races are really the conflicts between the elements. But regardless, I wanted to believe Darwinism was a factor that, you know, that made sense of the dynamics between the races. But my grandpa was trying to move me out of my belief in Darwinism, and because my grandpa, as an existentialist, he doesn't want to believe that anything's innate. Like, I remember one time I told my grandpa, I was like, what do you think about Noam Chomsky's idea? Noam Chomsky's a Jewish guy, that, you know, language is innate. And my grandpa was like, I don't know if I believe that. And I was like, what? But Noam Chomsky's a genius, blah, blah. But my grandpa didn't want to believe anything's innate, because if you believe something's innate, like Darwinism, like, oh, we're motivated by instinctual stuff, or even Freudianism. My grandpa wasn't a big fan of Freud either. But I liked Freud, because I'm like, yeah, religion is just Freudian. It's just a delusion, and Freud was right. But I wanted to believe that, you know, because I wanted to destroy Christianity, because I wanted to race mix the white people, you know, and destroy spirituality. But now I understand what my grandpa's saying is, as an existentialist, he doesn't want to believe anything's innate. He wants people to take responsibility. And my grandpa would say, take responsibility for upgrading your software. And that is elevating your software beyond, because I was functioning under superior. See, like, if I believed in Darwinism, then I'll think, okay, well, then I want to have a lot of, you know, I want to have a lot of babies, and I might have sex with many women and try to get them pregnant, not caring about the fact that I might be producing suffering in the world, and I might not be in the flow, and the babies will be, you know. But if I believe in Darwinism, in superior, inferior software, and I want to be superior by having many babies, and the women want to be superior by having sex with the alpha male, my grandpa would say it's not due to Darwinism. It's not instinctual Darwinism, because if you believe that, then you're gonna justify it. But my grandpa would say, no. We have the ability to upgrade our software, and yeah, I might act in that way because I'm stuck in superior, inferior software, and I want to be superior by having many children with many women, and the woman wants to be superior by having children with the best man, so she'll have superior children. But you can transcend that to mutual participation, to ultimately the flow, and being not a good person, but a beneficial presence. So I transcend the self, the person, to being a beneficial presence, to oneness consciousness. And my grandpa talks about, like, yeah, your mode of being and mode of seeing, upgrading your mode of being and mode of seeing. So, but like I said, in 2020, I wrote my Based on True Story book, and that Based on True Story book was filled with my anti-white propaganda, communism stuff. I was against Donald Trump. He's a white supremacist, and I was against Eisenhower's daughter, who was, you know, talking about the aliens and stuff. I'm like, she's just a white supremacist, because again, I saw the belief in the aliens. I saw that as just a mask for white supremacy and Nazism, but I was the opposite, you know. I was an anti-white, and I saw the like QAnon people, and they were like, and some of them were white, and I wanted to just you know, defeat the white people. But I did, like, it was just you know, I tried to elevate the black man. The black man, you know, it's just victim blaming. The reason why they do bad things is because they're victims, and it's this product of trauma. And I tried to, like, I was basically went back to my Marxist default. So I'll get to what happens next in the story.